Welcome to A Parent's Guide to Child Development. I'm your host, Anna-Marie Ron Furley from Fledgling's Flight. Each podcast, we strive to give parents the tools they need to help their child thrive through conversations with experts in child development and psychology, where you can learn about the most important information that you didn't know existed. Perfect. I'm very excited today to have my guest, Elizabeth McGuire, who is a speech language pathologist, but also is bilingual, which I think is a really interesting and fascinating conversation to be having. So I'll be asking you a few questions about raising children bilingual as well, because you're the first guest that we've ever had with this particular specialty. So language acquisition is one of my favorite topics. So I'm also super excited to sort of get into the nitty-gritty of it. And what people may or may not know if they're first-time parents is that in the beginning, baby's sort of like making a lot of noises, and they're doing some experimentation trying to figure out how to sort of like echo the sounds that they're hearing from their caregivers. So about what age do children start making those kinds of noises?
Oh, right from the beginning.
It,
So it's interesting actually from what the research shows, like right after birth, that babies start to filter the words and the language that they're used to hearing, and then like kind of remove from their ability to use the words or the way of speech that that would be like from like a different kind of style. You know how R is in Spanish, and like mech, I can barely do it. I'm trying with French. Like the merci, I'm just barely getting close to saying it almost right. Because I didn't grow up with French, right? So I didn't hear that. So that's at birth. Isn't that amazing? At birth, the babies start to already, I don't need to say them. So I'm not going to do the for my speech, or like the tonal languages in Chinese, let's say, like, so if you don't hear it, the as already zero baby, just born, will actually like not not keep it within its ability to use. So it's pretty wild. It's so very from the very, very beginning.
I remember reading something about, in certain languages, certain American sounds like R's or L's are difficult for other, let's say, Asian populations to reproduce. And for you, like, or for us, like the German, there's like a guttural R in the back, or like different language have different things. And I remember reading what, to your point, is that if a child's not too exposed to that, then they will have difficulty after those language centers in the brain start closing down around the age 7, that they will have a really hard time to reproduce certain sounds, just because, like you said, they haven't been exposed to them. So I think that's so fascinating.
And actually, that's a good point of bringing up 7, because it's an interesting dynamic in the speech therapy field. Like between 7 and 9, like the lexicon starts to kind of, like you said, kind of close. Like after 9 years old, it gets harder for people to learn how to articulate if they're saying something incorrectly. It gets more challenging to change your speech sounds once you're after 9. And sometimes, they're waiting for them to grow out of it, for them to grow out of it. Like I have a friend of mine, and his daughter is 8, or I think yeah, she's 8. I think she just turned 8. And she still says aw. And I'm like, oh, you need to take her to speech. You need to, you know, and so some school districts and um agencies won't, they said, well, it can grow up until 7 to 9, so we're gonna wait until then. But it's kind of like a incorrect usage of that milestone, because they should be saying it earlier. They should be able to say it earlier, I should say. They should be able to say the sound earlier. And like even in pre-K and kinder, they should be able to say the sounds earlier, even if they're not saying them correctly. That tells us that they will be able to say them in the future. But if they're not saying them correctly, period. I've worked with S families or S clients all the way. I'd rather do that. Like I've worked with toddler, or I've worked with kindergarteners on their S because they couldn't articulate it at all. So because we knew in kindergarten at 5 and 5th grade or 5 years old that they couldn't say their S yet, then we did work on S. I mean, also S is one of the unusual sounds. It doesn't behave like other sounds. S is its own over there. But but like so it is a statistic that is understood generally, but it's not always understood and interpreted correctly. So then that can sometimes cause families to put off speech services. And then after 9, oh, they didn't get it. Well, then it becomes more difficult. So that's one of those things like, well, if you're concerned, always consult a speech pathologist, so that's my go-to, like as a parent, your gut instinct is worth a lot, right? I'm the expert in speech and language. You're the expert on that child. You've known them since they were in your womb, moms, and dad's pretty close, too. If you can catch it, there's having some kind of a problem. You can tell, you can feel it, right? There's just something that you feel in your gut, like, is something right? Something isn't right. That's when you go for services. You don't wait for them to have a hard time later, right?
Yeah.
And you don't wait for somebody else to say, oh, they'll get it later. I mean, I've heard that so much. And like I've seen people on like TikTok. I have a pretty popular TikTok. I could use more followers on Instagram and YouTube, but but looking around, sometimes I see parents and they're like, "Oh, is my baby going to be okay?" And then they see this. Oh, I see all these responses. I'm like, "No, they'll get there. Oh, he'll start talking when he wants to." I was no, no. I mean, yes, but no. Like yes, they'll get there, and there are things that we can do to help them. And if your baby is under 18 months, right? They're they're not doing the things that I'm often seeing in these TikToks, like, how much do I want to jump in? Because it's really important as early as possible, even with the speech sounds like S's and Z's and teaches that you don't think, is a big deal from 0 to 3, but in the school ages, I guess it's a little bit out of our technical 18-month-old, but it is still something important to be aware of, that if your child isn't make the sounds correctly, have them be seen earlier when I would say earlier before, while it's easier before 7, right?
Mhm. So that brings me to my next question is what are some important milestones that you look for in a child in early development?
Okay, so milestones early on, right? The really, really, really important ones that I mean, it's funny, you almost take it for granted. So, and also I want to make sure that I emphasize this is general speech ideas, general speech information. This isn't a medical advice. I'm not telling you what is absolutely correct and not correct with your child because I don't know your child. Every child I've ever had, I've, been in the field, like officially licensed since 2000, 3, 4, but I've been working in it since before grad school because of being bilingual. I was assisting the monolingual speakers back in undergrad. I did observation and I helped out beforehand to make sure this is what I wanted to do. So I've been in the field for a long time, and no two children have ever been the same, ever. I said, oh, there's this from this one and this from this one, but looking exactly the same and having the same issue slash way to address it, they're different. I mean, overall generalities is what I'm saying now, but in general, every child is different. So if you're really concerned, then call me, go to babblebetter.com if you're in California or Arizona, or somebody local. Either way, find somebody. You don't have to go to me, but find someone, that can help you out. So that's kind of the just so your listeners understand, this is very important, right? That part. Okay. So milestones from the beginning. I can't tell you how many families I've had, whether 2 years old, and does he use eye contact? No. Has he ever? No. One family I had, he didn't he didn't give eye contact even before 6 months old. He would wake up, get his little binky, his little blanket, and they'd poke him in front of his pocoyo. And as he got older, he would walk over to his little sling slide thingy, like the little couch, little baby couch thing, and watch TV. Like he was a little under 1 year old couch potato. Like and then when he wanted food, he would walk over to the kitchen, like, and then food would appear. He never looked to his parents as, "Could you get me something?" Right? He never, like, had awareness of the adult. So if you don't see awareness, if you're not getting that eye contact, that's boom, one of the first things that you need to have, right? First eye contact, and then all that the cutesy stuff before 1 years old. That's what you need to see. You need to see some kind of sound, consonant, vowels. It doesn't matter if it's gaga, 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 ka, back guttural type sounds, or the ba 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 ma ma da ba ba da ba 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 ba. Right? Oh, they're funny enough. It's so often that I have a child he's the back sound kid, or he's the front kid. There's so often it's one or the other. So don't worry if you're saying your child at that age is right? It's something. There's some kind of movement. It's more than one. It's good when there's that's the first one, right? Or whatever the sound is. And then we get it combined with a consonant. It's when it's, and there's nothing coming out, you know, just nothing sometimes. And then if they're just like, when you're in their face, and if you're at their face, they should be sharing with you. I think he's 2 now, and he has some neurological issues, and I'm working with the mom to be close enough to him, and I'm helping them with the bonding, because that's bonding in addition to communication. That's parent child, that's where the love is, right? That's where the bonding is. It's that communication, it's the eye contact, right? I'm having to teach mom, because he's had the neurological issues, it didn't come naturally to him. And so mom is kind of separate. So I'm teaching him, like, put him right here. He's right there, and he's looking right at me, and then you can get that ma 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 ma. So I'm really working a lot with that, and it has a big deal, a big influence on that feeling, that bond, that love. And sometimes I notice they do, like, they just kind of leave him on the side, and he's doing some of these, like, repetitive things. Like, that's when we need to be there. We need to be in his face. Get in his face. It's okay. That's part of the interaction. That's part of what we need for that communication. And that's going to your question also, the reciprocal, taking turns. Ababa, 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 ababa. We need that reciprocal. We need to see some imitation, because a child isn't going to start saying mama, right? Unless they hear it, unless they start to try to imitate you. That's one of the main first things that I work on. Sometimes children will go past when I'm trying to say baba, and all of a sudden they'll just go straight to bottle. Some children just jump right over the imitation, and they won't say anything, and then they'll have a word. It's kind of, like I said, it's kind of random, it's fun, but it's but for the most part, I bet you they're probably in their little crib going, "Ba, ba, they're figuring it out, right? They're in their little crib. What was how do you say that? Like, they're thinking about it, and they finally get there. So, so those are the early, 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 early ones, right? And we're conditioning them. They're conditioning us. We get that interaction when it's good eye contact. Then we get the interaction. We learn their scheduling. We learn the giving. We see some pointing. That's also a step that is one of the best ones to get the pointing and the gesturing, and then not always giving gestures. Once they start making some sense, then we can maybe try fading some of those away and have them do a little bit more work to get that communication happening, instead of parents always knowing. Because once you're so good at meeting their needs as an adult, as the parent, your child, you get in this groove, right? And that's a lot of times when parents don't realize, oh, they should be talking right now, because they're just going along with the groove. They know this is the schedule, this is what this means, this is what that means. And then, oh, they're not making sounds yet, they're not asking yet, right? And then they'll come to me, I'm like, can you say pick up? And they go like this. I'm like, show me. And then they pick me up, and I'm like, you just did a gesture. Obviously playfully, but like, I saw your hands. And a lot of parents don't realize that they're helping the words. So the
Mm,
toddlers are responding to gestures, not the words, and they're so used to that, and they don't realize it, and it's not your fault. You're just in such a groove. I've got this parenting thing down, and then while your child isn't developing the language as they should, you don't catch it, because we're just doing the same thing. We're waiting for you to get there, but they're not getting there. Does that make sense?
yeah. Sometimes I feel like, especially when parents have had multiple children, that like that last one, they're anticipating their needs, right? And they've had so much experience with other children and how they've communicated their needs, that in a way, like you were talking about with that 2-year-old, is that the child didn't have to ask anything because it's just being done for him. So they had
Oh,
anticipated,
that one.
but it wasn't helping him in the end, right?
Right. That's anticipation. That family was a first time parent. Actually, I find that it's the first time parents that they do this, because they want to meet their child's needs. It's their first baby. They
Right.
want to meet their child's needs. They're so excited to meet their child's needs. When it's the later ones, or when there's a lot of times parents will realize when their child is like 2.5, when the brand new baby, the littlest one, right, the second child is making more sounds than the first one.
Oh,
I have that a lot when they're two something. So that's one of the reasons why I want to be on here, and that's one of the reasons why my most of my social media is there, because I want people, I want to help you realize, wait a minute, we need to start them in sooner. Like the Pocoyo laying, the little baby couch potato, like he should have been like immediately, like as soon as they could have, like at 12 months he should have been in there,
yeah.
because he wasn't communicating. But they're so used to meeting his needs and they don't realize it. And that he'll grow out of it.
Yeah.
Slash, he'll get there when he's ready. Nah,
Yeah.
you
So
know.
this leads to my next question, which we've been talking a little bit about, but maybe giving you like a little bit more specific information. When should parents be concerned that their child might have speech delays?
Well, as I said earlier, with the in your gut, right? So if you've got that little toddler that you try to look at him and he's like here and doing that,
Mm.
right? That's the first clue. And that, like, wait a minute, I'm here, I'm saying hi, baby. And they're they're looking at your hair, they're grabbing at your hair, they're looking at the trees. Sometimes they do this little hand thing, right? They're the adult awareness isn't there. So that's usually before a year. Usually, yeah, that's why I wanted to put 18 months on the form for for the title for today, because they should be speaking by 18 months. They
Okay.
should have those first words. That's one of the reasons why I said the 5 words by 18 months, because there should be more than 5. So if you're like, oh, which ones are the 5 they should be saying? I'm hoping that you out there are thinking, only 5? Wait, because there should be more than 5. So if your child isn't saying 15 to 20 by 18 months,
Mm.
right? That's a year and a half. your child is a year and a half, that to me, I can kind of think is the sweet spot. Like really 15 months is when you want to start. Okay, 12 months. That's we're thinking at 12 months. Okay, let's go to Babble Better, practice some of her skills, go to use my services. I have a program that I'm working to put together. We could talk about later, but you know, really work on it if they're not saying it by 12 months. If they're possible, there might be even other issues with the eye contact. If there's no eye contact, you can do it before that if you're already noticing issues. Your pediatrician or with your state's 0 to 3 program, there is a free program out there. So you could, if there are other issues as well, you could look in earlier. But 12 months, start extra hard working on things. Like I said, go the different programs and advice that I give out there. And then at 15, they're still not making that much progress. Okay, you know, or at 15 months, I like to say that's the no F zone, because you should be worried at 15 months if you don't have to watch your language at 15 months, if you don't have to watch your language around them, then you should be going and finding a speech pathologist, because at 15 to 18 months is when the oops, he just repeated a bad word, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, it's cute, but it's also a good, important level. And if your child isn't there and you don't have to worry about them imitating, as much as it's silly and sounds funny, but it's true, right? Like if they're not saying what you're saying, dada or mama or uh uh-oh, I need to be careful, because we're talking and we're not telling it to him, but he's hearing it. Right. He needs to be eavesdropping in our conversation. And if he's not doing that by 15 months, that I think is when we start the process of services. If he has some big spurt at 18 months or 2 years or something, great. Then at least we were on top of it. But most of the time it's that 15 months, and oh yeah, he's picked up more words, but he's still delayed or whatever. The parents will tell me when I'm coming in at 18 months. I'm like, I'm impressed. You're here. You're calling me at 18 months. Yes, you're the people. I'm so glad, that we're getting the education, because the earlier we start, the better that likely outcome and the more success you're going to have, and you're more ready for school. And research shows that the vocabulary that you have at 3 years old is one of the greatest indicators of future success as an adult at 8, and language skills actually at 18. So we can, as regular adults or as in your action with your child, you could do everything quietly, change the diaper quietly, bathe them, roll the ball. But if we want to teach the language, if we want them to learn vocabulary, we want to do, all the sounds, right? We go, "Ruff, ruff, 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 ruff," make all of the sounds, with the school bus, and you sing the song, and the wheels on the bus, and beep, beep, and do all the sounds, do all the naming, do all the sounds, and that's like one of the things I've noticed, without realizing as a parent, us as adults, we know the vocabulary. So we'll say, oh, do you want that one or that one? This one or that one,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
That's us, because we already know it. As the itty bitty little people that are learning, they just know, there's these things that I want to play with. You call it this one and that one. They're just going to start learning this one and that one.
Mhm.
So often I hear parents, without, because you're not thinking language learning. So again, it's not your fault, but as an adult, you're just used to talking like that, right? So I don't want to say this one or that one. I want to say bus. We want bus or boat, right? And then we take the boat, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And then you're doing drum, brum, 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 beep, beep, or whatever it is, right? And you're taking turns and you're keeping it fun, right? And you're making the sounds. Whereas, somebody that doesn't think about it, right? You're just you could just be quiet throughout your day. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, except it doesn't help grow the speech. So it's to me, it's a better idea. Like talk to them, describe your day, describe what you're doing, describe what they're doing. Uh-huh. A lot of us actually use the phrase announcer speak. Like if anybody listening, like if you watch basketball or baseball, like baseball season right now, right? You watch them, the 75 is up. He's a lefty, he's on the left side, right? You're describing what you see, right? So you announce what he's doing. Oh, the doggy is running, right? The doggy is da da da, and you don't say it as you. Like a lot of times parents are like, are you running? Like, no, we want to think that we are in their mind. We're talking for them. So he goes, I'm running. Ruff, 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 ruff. I'm running. Right? We say what the child would be saying. Let's go. Not, do you want to go? Right? We don't want to use adult quiet talking. We want to use the bigger speech. I guess I'm doing that right now just because I'm trying to be clear anyway for the video. So I'm using a little bit of my toddler talk a little bit, right? Where I'm talking more open and I'm moving my mouth and I'm explaining things, like you and me are like, hey, do you want to go out? Hey, what should we have for dinner? We could talk like this and it's no big deal. We're talking with our mouth and, kind of like this and blah, blah, blah. And that's how adults speak to each other, right? But then as we're talking to our children, we need to make it bigger. And the bigger we are, the more interesting and more attentive our children will be, right? And then, let's go. Whee! The doggy is all over the place, or I don't know, whatever, right? But you make it silly. Like that was just so silly. Like if they're not saying words yet, we don't want to say, let's go over on the couch, right? You might once or twice, but if they're not saying words yet, we want to speak to their level. We say doggy, let's go doggy. And I am not of the from my training, let's say it again. From my training, we say be grammatical. Don't use a lot of words when they're really, really little, but be grammatical. We don't want to say car go or doggy go. Um, or we don't want to say like, like if you're saying he is running, right, is the right way to say it. We don't want to say doggy running,
Right.
right? Doggy is running. You just throw that is in there, right? Maybe we won't say the, right? But we say doggy is running or let's go. I mean, you could say doggy go, like it's kind of, in precise, right? So that's kind of okay. But we don't want to say doggy running. We want to say the doggy is running. We want to use the actually correct grammar, even though they're not saying it yet. So I say the doggy is running there, and they'll say, "Oh, doggy running," right? So we want to say it correctly, and model it correctly, even if they're not going to say it right. And that's even with sometimes when they have like the cute word, the cute words where they say it like wrong, but so then the adults start saying it wrong, like the
Right.
child, and then you're like,
Yeah,
okay, I guess, but
I used to say caliper instead of caterpillar. And I still to this day kind of like default to the wrong way to say it because I just transpose those consonants.
yes,
But yeah.
they're called fixed forms where they just don't change. Like Paschetti
Oh
is
yeah.
another one. Yeah, we call in my world we call those fixed forms because they're fixed. They kind of just got stuck, and that's how they say them. And yeah, and it's cute. It's funny, but it's not the correct way. But so, how much do you want? And that's where, as parents, we decide, okay, how much do we want to fix this? How much are we gonna wait, or things like that. Like we're gonna, give it time, let the cuteness happen here and there, right? But in general, modeling correctly and that type of thing. So going back to the actual words, at 18 months, there should be between 18 to 20 words or so. If you have more, great. But I suggest not working on counting or colors. That's one of the things I know we talked about. It might be one of the questions. Am
It is.
I cutting you off?
We're gonna get there.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
So I want to get back to like raising children bilingual, and there's a lot of like myths about,
Mm.
and one of them is people are afraid to introduce a second language to a child because they're afraid that it's going to be too hard for them, it's going to cause speech delays. And I want you to give your expert opinion about whether or not it's any harder for a child to be exposed or learn a second language when they're really little.
Well, when they're really little is really the time to do it. That's when they're little sponges. The brain is a sponge. They're gonna pick it up, So I would say do it early, as early as possible. Um, One of the issues that I have that I hear a lot is, oh well, we weren't sure, so we didn't want to introduce it to him yet. And then the child is like 7, 8, and that's where it gets starts getting harder, right? Like we said earlier, it's already going to get harder, and that's only at like first, second grade, right? So it's early when it starts getting harder. So we might as well start when they're really little. But if you don't have good grammar in the second language,
Mm,
then use the grammar that you have, I should say, use the language that you have the good grammar in.
right,
you
right.
know so Sometimes there'll be a couple and one person speaks English, the other person speaks Spanish. It's a lot of usually what I work with. I've had some fun. I've been churchka. I've worked with the Russian family. I've worked with Haitian Creole was really interesting. I've had worked with some really interesting other languages and like how they make their sentences and stuff. So I've worked a lot because that's my certificate. Actually, I have the master's degree, and on top of that, I did do a special extra certification. So I'm not just bilingual. I actually did extra training for the bilingual multicultural speech language therapy. So I like being extra prepared, I guess, but it's a special program that I did at San Diego State that isn't in a lot of colleges. That was very fortunate that I got into that program, and I feel like that's why I really like doing a lot of my explaining and on my different social media things as well on the bilingualness is, you want to introduce the second language, but if your grammar is correct in English, go with the English. You can be the English parent and the other parent can be the Spanish parent.
Mhm.
Or, if they're young enough, you just use the word by itself. You don't have to use multiple words if you're not sure how to put them together. It's actually kind of easier as they're really little because they can't, or we don't need to give them long phrases in as they're babies, right? They are taking it all in, but this is dog, this is perro, this is wow wow, they can handle all of these words for the same thing. But I wouldn't say the dog está caminando. Like I don't recommend the mixing. Like
Mhm.
again, as parents, as adults, we understand what we're saying, even though we're mixing the two languages, right? So English is plus Spanish. It makes sense. It's a grammatical sentence as I said it, but as a baby learning language, he's gonna be calling it the dog está caminando, and when I was working in the school districts, right? So I've been a private speech pathologist and independent speech pathologist pretty much full time since 2013, but I was in the schools before that. So, I saw a lot of these issues. And one of the children that I actually saw, he was in kindergarten. He didn't speak one language. He could not speak a language. He straight up only could speak to people who do both English and Spanish because he would always do that mixing.
Oh man.
Yeah, yeah, and he wasn't the only one. He was the first one. I was like, "Oh my gosh." I'm like, "We're gonna have to teach him language, start in kindergarten." I'm like, "Oh my goodness." But right, because he was so used to hearing mixing all the time. And that's one of the things that's a little hard too with a lot of families, orange, anaranjado, right? In Spanish or orange in English. Anaranjado is orange in Spanish. So a lot of families will use, oh, the orange. whatever, and they'll mix. But I like to make sure I tweak it a little. I fudge by saying naranja, like the actual orange is a like the edible orange is a naranja. So I take away the so that's kind of how I fudge it. Naranja or azul instead of blue, right? So I recommend giving one phrase in each language. So, oh, el perro está corriendo. Oh, the dog is running. Let's go, right? Quiero leche. I want milk. Milk. I want milk. Leche, milk. You know, use them, mix them, interchange them. So you're teaching both and they understand that they're both the same thing,
Mhm.
and then also when they're bilingual, we have to make sure if they're in the school district, if they're looking at their skills, we need to make sure that they pay attention to both languages, because a lot of times I've heard actually from clients of mine that when they went into the school district that they only looked at English, like he doesn't speak that much English, like maybe he has some English, but we always look at the entire vocabulary. Like that is a rule since the 60s that we need to take into account all of the vocabulary the child knows and where their skills are, where we can build from, and are they actually delayed and disordered, or is it a language difference?
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's a whole other interview, I guess.
Yes. Yes. We'll have to
But
do another one just for that conversation.
yeah, does that make sense though?
Yeah,
Like,
it totally does. Yeah, thank you for
good.
that. So a lot of parents focus on making sure their child can name colors and can count to 10. I've heard you feel that this isn't a right priority for parents. What communication skills should they focus on instead?
Exactly. um Most everything else, no.
Everything but.
Right. Well, it's funny because, parents are like, well, what does my child need to learn? They think people automatically go to the school type learning. Like,
Right,
well, they're going to get it in school. Like, as
right,
far as speech therapy, like, we only want them to be able to know one color, name one color correctly by three. I have some of my students, some of my little clients, they can name multiple colors. They can count past five. We only want them to be able to count to three. But the thing is that's a memorization task. And then
mm,
that's also something that tends to be more common with children with autism, right? The lack of eye contact, the repetitive activities, right? The rote memorization, so some of them will be able to read by two, let's call it reading, but they'll see the word, right? Like sight read that, yes, or whatever they're seeing, then, and that's not typical, right? So what we should be working on, right? The typical language development is mama, binky, bottle, give me, or I want, or juice, right? The finger point. And if there's no finger point, oh, cookie, and then give me, and then they go from cookie to give me cookie is typical, right? Cookie. So some of these families, or some, I should say, some of these children, they can ask for the thing, or they can name 1 to 10, but when they're in the kitchen, they're just crying because they can't say, I want milk,
right.
right? So I believe in functional communication first. So being able to name the things that they want. The binky, you can call it binky is fine if we know binky means a bottle, or binky means the pacifier, or we call it passy, or the cute name for the blanket, Binky, Binky, Banky, right? Something like that. So they should be saying the things around them. They should be saying people's names. I should be able to say mama, and he looks at mama, hey mama, and all cute, right? So they should be working on the things around them, the people around them, the things that they're going to want to do, bath time, blanket, all the things that are around. And if those are like done and good, and I don't know what else to talk about, like literally going around the house, going couch, chair, doggy, right? Or putting things in categories. Like how many children have the little cutting toys, right? these are food, these are our clothes, these are my toys that are just toys, these are clothes, right? This is for eating, or what do we eat with? Can they say, can they give you the spoon? What do you drink? And they give you that. I mean, obviously that's a little closer to three versus, you know, the 18-month-old. But it's practicing those things first. And even please, like this, help please. I I don't know what you need help with. I mean, the real estate is expensive. Those words, if you have two words, that's as high as a lot of times those kids can go. We expect them to use the same number of words as their age, more or less, right? Up
Okay.
until about 5, 6. So 1 year old, they could say one word. At 2 years old, they could say two. If we say help, please, okay, I'm coming over to see what you need help with. And then oh, you need help open. Oh, you need help, you know, pull out, right? Something like that. Pull out the toy or open the refrigerator, open the juice box. And so for me, I practice open as one of the first things I do because they always want something opened. Open, we do open the door. We do turn on. How many times do you? And that's kind of my sign. It's kind of similar to ASL, but a little different, like tapping. Turn on. We turn on the light. We turn on the TV. We turn on the toy, turn on, or like put on, right? So those types of things. Can they say put on? Can they say turn on? Can they ask to open, even if they can't name it? Maybe I can't name juice, but I can ask open, you know? So all those, I'm a big proponent of functional first.
Very good. So I know this is another pet peeve of yours. So I've heard that good job is not the best response for toddlers. What would be a better way to recognize their correct response other than saying it that way?
Oh, oh my gosh, it is just the easiest thing to say. Oh, good job. Um, and I'm not blaming because it's easy to say, but it's too vague in one regard. What did I do right? Okay, I did something. Mom just said I did something right. Depending on their level of awareness, oh, I just did that thing and that's what I did right. I prefer either good plus action, good listening,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. Good, um, whatever the action was, good running. Let's go. Something. Oh, good running. Oh, you kept up with me. All right. Something like that. I mean, but that's also using pronouns, which I like to stay away from until they understand what the words are, like that's one of the jokes, right? Pick you up. And they're saying pick you up because they always hear pick you up. That's
Yeah.
where I was saying we want to be speaking in their brain. If I say pick up, then pick up means either one of us. If I say pick you up, I would say pick me up. I would say pick me up to him so I could pick him up, right? Because he wants to be picked up because he's going to be imitating me. That's what we want is him to imitate me. So I say pick me up and then pick him up.
Yeah.
Um, so it's too vague. I would either say good action word and it teaches the vocabulary, or I'll just say, if you said what's pick if I say pick up, and they did it, pick up, and just repeat, yeah, pick up, right? Just repeat it to them. What did they do right? They're running with us. Run, yay, running. Reinforce it. Yeah, run, let's run. Okay, let's run. Something like that, where you're telling them what the word is. You're reinforcing it and repeating it.
Yeah.
I said, or you said this thing. Oh, okay. And I'm saying it again and going with it. So I'm letting you lead, child is leading, and I'm reinforcing. Is there one that you've seen, like where a parent says good job about in a certain situation that that you can think of.
Maybe eating their food, like they cleaned their plate or they ate all their snack or something like that. And you then so they say, "Good job." And so, yeah.
Yeah, so that's one of the things, like you could say good eating, or you could say, yum, eat, and then you can even say eat whatever it is. Eat cereal, eating cereal, yum, good eating. Eat, right? So I'm repeating and yeah, you're doing good eating. Let's go eat. We're eating our cereal. Eating that cereal.
Awesome. So we're about to wrap it up. One final question. What are the 5 words that every 18-month-old should know? This is what everyone's been waiting for. Time for the big reveal. What are those 5 words?
Well, like I said earlier, sort of kind of spoiled it a little, but all of those functional things, there should be a person, there should be action words, there should be um, requesting the favorite things. There should be favorite things. Your bottle, your binky, your juice. What do you like to drink? What water? There should be actual things that they want, people in their life, mama, dada. Like I said, you want to say mama, dada, so they'll repeat you. Because if you're not saying it, they're not going to say it.
Mhm.
I had a parent once, she said, he never says mama. I'm like, you're too present. He never has to call you because you're always there doing things for him. I'm like, sit back, let him want you, mama. And then he comes to you, say, oh, mama. And then go. Next week, he was saying mama. It was that quick for this little guy. It's like, mom was so happy. So like, yay, that was a great win. So yeah, so nouns, verbs, by 18 months. So like I said, if they're not using at least 5 words by 12 months, then we want to like really go hard on giving them lots and lots and lots of words. If they're not talking by 18, I say get them assessed immediately. It doesn't hurt to get them in early, it can only help. It might be hard on the psyche, like, oh, but we're doing the best for them by helping them and getting them in. So yeah, noun, verbs, prepositions, so there should be at least 20. So prepositions, on, like I was doing earlier, in, adjectives like hot or sleepy, so then teaching them, oh, I feel sleepy, I'm going to go to bed, right? So it's teaching them kind of awareness of their body. Social words, bye bye, bye.
Awesome. So how can people get a hold of you?
Everything Babble Better. On social media and on my website, it's together. The business name is apart, but BABBLEBETTER, babblebetter.com, Babble Better, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. I think most things out there, I have the Babble Better at Babble Better. So you could find me in any of those. I have a 20% discount that I'm going to put out for people from the podcast. I'm working on the course, like it's almost ready, it's almost up, and I've actually this podcast made me think of something. So if anybody wants to be part of my beta group of like how much like you have a say in what I do put into that program, you're gonna have a 50% discount for helping me out. Send me, whatever you use, YouTube or I think you can message on YouTube or Instagram, or go to my website, babblebetter.com, and send me a message that you want to be part of the beta group, and then you can be part of my programming and get a big discount. So
Oh, that's so exciting. So we'll make sure we'll have that information in the caption and so that everyone
great.
can reach out to you and have the discount code and also be a part of an exciting new program. And that would be amazing. So thank you for your time today. I thought it was a
Yeah,
really
for sure.
fascinating conversation.
I love being here. Thanks.
Yay. Thank you so much. Bye.